Hi there, I'm Joey from EDH Rec. A little while ago, I made a video about a silly Rule 0 deck idea, although that video was actually kind of my way of backdooring in a discussion about the social aspects of Rule 0 itself. You know, how do silly ideas sometimes clash with practical rules enforcement? What are the various issues that can come up when you ask a table if they'll let you bend the rules? And what are your responsibilities when you're the one bending them? I'm really proud of that video, you should check it out. Like all our deck lists, there'll be a link to it down in the description below. And you should subscribe too while you're there, by the way. Like, I've seen the numbers, only like half of you are subscribed. You should click that button. I know you want to. But in that video, I teased that I definitely wanted to build one of those deck ideas that I was ruminating on, and now I finally have. So that's what this video is. No fluff and faff. I already did a much deeper dive about the rules ramifications and the social aspects in that other video, so this is just a good old-fashioned deck introduction. A lot of people asked me to share the deck list once it was finished, and it is now, so I'd just like to debut it in the hopes that maybe it inspires some of you out there too. This is my deck that bends the rules of Commander, as well as the rules of time and space. Quick recap. The Rule 0 idea I teased was this. Whenever you cast the commander, it evolves into the next version of that character. I gave some examples of doing this with Omnath, or perhaps with Gandalf, or Urza, Mishra, maybe even a Braids flip-flopping back and forth like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But the characters that I eventually chose are the new Who's. Start with the 9th Doctor, and then when he goes back to the command zone, he's regenerated into the 10th, and then the 11th, the 12th. Immediately, I'm sure people will wonder why I went with Doctor 9 instead of Doctor number 1. Wouldn't it be more fitting to go through the whole thing from the very start? For me, though, this just comes down to practicality. How many times do you actually recast your commander each game, really? I can't recall the last game that I cast my commander even 4 times from the command zone. It's rare I even cast it 3 times from the zone. So to do what I want the deck to do, it made sense to start with the doctors that people are probably the most familiar with in the first place. Here's the full deck list layout. It's very reminiscent of the timey-wimey precon, of course. As you can tell, this is just a Jeskai deck. I put all 4 of my doctors in a row into a single card sleeve, treating them like a single card with their full combined color identity, and swapping to the next one whenever it gets sent back to the command zone. Technically, there are other green doctors 13 and onward, but again, I really just don't think I'll end up casting beyond Doctor 12 anytime soon, so it would feel weird to me to have any green cards in here. I don't want to push things to a point where anyone feels like I'm using this Rule 0 concept to do some angle shooting, which is also why I'm not using any Doctor's companions in the command zone, so people know this is all just for fun. Besides, focusing on the quote new Who era feels like it gives me just more focus for the deck. Truly, the reason that I chose this concept for my Rule 0 idea isn't just because the character literally embodies the idea of changing each time, but I also just like suspend cards. I like upkeep triggers. The Time Spiral and Future Sight sets were one of those blocks that really cemented me into Magic, so it's just neat to play around in that sandbox again. Starting with Doctor 9 fits that bill really, really well. Not only that, but it also helped to inform my governing principle for the rest of the deck's construction too. Having some focus to help narrow down the options honestly helped a lot, so that I could hone in on what I actually found the most enjoyable about the concept. So, a brief overview. Obviously, these suspend cards are the truest of the true MVPs. I got to mix in some of those new suspend cards from the precon with some of my old favorites from back in the Time Spiral block, which makes me just so happy. The Kraken is especially one of my favorites. And there's even a couple new time countery cards in the new MKM set too, which is rad to see. I didn't keep too many Vanishing cards because the 9th Doctor is pretty bad with most of them, but his extra upkeeps are actually quite good for some Vanishers, especially Chronozoa, a card I cannot believe I got to put into a deck in the year 2024. It's absolute jank, but I want to win by flooding a board with so many copies of these, y'all. And to help out, of course, are some extra upkeep helpers too, like the Paradox Haze and Sphinx of the Second Sun. The 9th Doctor won't be around forever, after all. Now, there are only so many good suspend cards, obviously, so filling out the rest of the deck was really the hard part. I mean, of course I'm gonna stick with some of the in-universe cards for the necessities, such as the ramp and the interaction pieces, just because that feels the most fitting. Time Wipe is just too perfect, you know? Reverse the Polarity is a dang good card, and Trial of a Time Lord is just an honest-to-goodness excellent continual removal effect. And some of these ramp cards I would want to use anyway, so why not stay on theme? But even that well dries up pretty fast, so what fills in the rest of those gaps? The answer is playing with time. Hard as I could, I tried to theme the remaining card slots with stuff that makes it feel like time is my ally. We are telling time what to do. We dig through time, and we can see the future. This is what finally made the deck feel like it clicked to me. I wanted it to feel like a Time Lord's deck. I'm not even a Doctor Who fan, I don't even truly know what I mean when I say that, except that it just felt like the proper direction for the deck to go. Using things that are themed around, clocks or stuff that's temporal. Little ways that make the theme actually feel fleshed out. Like, heck, I get to use Aeon Engine in this deck. Reverse that turn order. What could feel more time travel-y than that? And that philosophy extended into the deck's win condition ideas too, to be honest. My biggest criticism of the Who precons is that they sacrificed a lot of function for the sake of flavor. They really focused heavily on value, which made several of the cards feel wheel spinny. So sometimes the cards didn't really pack a punch. So here, that kind of made me feel desperate for some cards that had some extra oomph to them. But I didn't want to just resort to, and now in this deck I've got a random Bomb Dragon, or what have you, Like, even if it would help the deck perform, suddenly having those ridiculous bomb powerhouses would make me feel like I'm not doing the theme justice. And as easy as it would be to fit extra turn spells into this deck, which would be perfectly on theme, admittedly, that's just not what I wanted to do, and it felt against the spirit of the Rule Zero idea in the first place, where really I am just trying to play something silly. But I needed at least some firepower in here, right? Because, well, I don't want 20-turn games. So it really was that time as your ally idea that helped me pick a couple extra things that could gradually turn time into win conditions. With extra upkeeps, for instance, extravagant replication can fill a board right up. I could potentially make an actually decent number of tokens from Assemble the Legion, which I've been wanting to do ever since that card came out, but I never could because that card is usually so dang slow. Even a simple Magmatic Force deals its damage over time. Hopefully that governing principle makes these feel like cool cards to show up, and if things do go my way, hopefully it makes them feel like cool ways to end the game alongside all of those big face-bashing suspend creatures, or the army of Chronozoas that I'm desperately trying to make. Even if some of those cards don't immediately seem to fit in with the Who aesthetic, I'm hoping that these types of effects still resonate as my opponents having to fight against time. Now there's a notable exception to this, which clever viewers may have already clocked, and that's the card Sakashima the Imposter in the main board. What is this one doing here? That's not really on theme at all. Well, you caught me, but here's the reason why. I actually have an altar of this card, an Among Us Imposter from ALK Altars. I pitched him this idea and he delivered in spades, taking Sakashima's headpiece and putting it right onto the Among Us characters. This is like my favorite thing, and it needs to have a home. I need to play this in a deck. And since it's kind of outer spacey and the Doctor encounters copies of things all the time anyway, I just had to play it here. If you're wondering how the deck plays, it's a bunch of upkeeps. Hopefully the Ninth Doctor helps get some big cards into play a little faster than normal, or helps us tick up some extra upkeep cards. Playing with a lot of suspend creatures means you run out of cards in hand pretty fast, as it turns out, and it also changes how much you value traditional forms of mana acceleration, so that's something pretty important to keep your eyes on. It's very likely for the first commander to perish as just a 2/4, of course, so when available, casting the next version to start putting some of those cards on layaway will hopefully accrue some extra good value as well. The 10th Doctor's ability can be pretty hit or miss when you're not making a concerted effort to manipulate the top of your library, but this is when I find that some of those copy effects, like the quantum misalignments and such, get especially good, just to help the 10th Doctor get good hit accuracy by volume rather than by precision. And I'm gonna level with you, if the 10th Doctor dies and we have to go all the way to casting the 11th, we're really relying upon our other cards in the deck to help us out at that point, because boy howdy is the 11th Doctor's design super narrow, and it feels especially bad when you have to pay 7 mana for him. This is by no means the most powerful deck I've ever made. I hope I gave it a fighting chance, but the point of this deck isn't to win. I'm just hoping that, as with any good Rule Zero deck, this one gets to showcase a unique experience to my opponents that maybe they don't get to encounter every day. Also, here's one final quirk of the deck that I'd like to point out. If I encounter a table who's a little dubious about the Rule Zero idea, I've made the deck in such a way that it can switch over to a regular EDH deck, no problem. Bid adieu to the extra doctors, take that Clara from the main board and put her right into the command zone instead. And boom, you've got a regular Jeskai upkeeps deck that leans strong on some silly time flavor, just to make sure that other people have an alternate option that suits their comfort level. And that's my silly deck. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, there are a lot of other things to pay attention to bizarre rules interactions that you have to account for, questions that come up like how does this affect commander damage, what happens if you run through all of those options, etc. But that's what the other deep dive video was for. This is just a deck debut. I just hope it inspired you a little. I hope that talking about bizarre things like this gets your brain moving, and it kind of makes you think about other ways to add flair to your game nights, both in terms of like Rule Zero and in terms of using out-of-the-box themes, out-of-the-box cards, out-of-the-box strategies. Like, don't get me wrong, it can be hard to line up a game night at all, so when the opportunity arises, I usually just want to play good old-fashioned Commander, because it's already a wild enough environment in a Commander game as it is. But sometimes it's fun to shake up our systems and do something that we don't normally do. Like, this is the first Jeskai deck that I've built in years, I think. So even if Rule Zero things don't necessarily interest you all that much, I think that practicing in that type of sandbox can still be a cool way to hone your skills and understandings and to help you out for your other deck projects too. So yeah, consider giving stuff like this a shot. That's it from me. Let me know about your favorite rules-bending Commander decks down in the comments below. And by the way, liking and subscribing to the EDH Rec YouTube channel actually statistically lessens your likelihood to encounter Mana Screw. So make sure you do that too. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, remember, EDH Rec your deck before you wreck your deck.